The end of Oak Street starts like any other summer night in 1982. Until it doesn't. A cosmic event tears a quiet suburban street clean out of its own reality and drops it somewhere else entirely. Somewhere with teeth. The Platt family has to do the thing every genre family in this specific lineage has had to do, decade after decade. Stop bickering, stop pretending things are normal, and survive together or not at all. David Robert Mitchell, working with producer J.J. Abrams, isn't hiding his sources. This is a film built consciously on top of a very specific tradition. Ordinary neighborhoods, extraordinary cosmic intrusion, and the particular terror of watching the safest place you know become the most dangerous. That tradition didn't start in 2026. It started decades earlier.
Oh my God!
Start with the decade the film is actually set in. 1982 wasn't just a year for Oak Street's characters, it was the year this entire genre found its footing. When Amblin-adjacent filmmakers realized the most unsettling thing you could do was point a camera at a cul-de-sac and let something impossible walk into frame. A few years later, one film took that formula and handed it to the kids themselves, sending them somewhere no adult could follow. It's not the most famous entry in this lineage. It might be the most foundational. Joe Dante's Explorers doesn't get talked about the way its more polished siblings do, but it's doing something Oak Street needs its own 80s ancestor to do, taking suburban kids and launching them, without warning or preparation, into a situation their parents can't fix. Three boys build a makeshift spacecraft out of scavenged parts and a half-understood dream, and what follows is equal parts wonder and dread, the sense that curiosity has a cost, and that cost gets paid in real danger, not just adventure movie stakes. That's the through line Oak Street picks up decades later. Explorers isn't interested in cosmic events as spectacle first, it's interested in what happens to ordinary kids when the extraordinary shows up uninvited and doesn't ask permission. The Platts don't build a spacecraft. Their street gets pulled somewhere unknown against their will. But the emotional architecture is the same. Young people forced to be braver and more resourceful than the situation has any right to demand of them, with the adults just as lost as everyone else. It's a scrappier, rougher film than what came after it. That roughness is part of the point. This genre started with kids figuring it out as they went. By the early 90s, the genre had grown up, or at least gotten bigger budgets. The cosmic intrusion was no longer a mystery kept at arm's length. It had teeth, scale, and a full skeleton. One film took the formula from the previous decade and asked what happens when the threat isn't ambiguous anymore, when you can see exactly what's hunting you. And it changed what audiences expected from this kind of story for the next 30 years. Jurassic Park didn't invent the idea of prehistoric creatures menacing modern people, but it perfected the version of that idea Oak Street is directly descended from. Awe curdling into terror in real time, delivered through the eyes of characters who start the film in a state of wonder and end it running for their lives. Spielberg's control of that tonal pivot, the exact moment the ride stops being fun, is the single clearest technical blueprint for everything Oak Street's dinosaur sequences are trying to do 60 years and one cosmic anomaly later. What Oak Street borrows most precisely isn't the dinosaurs themselves, it's the structure underneath them. Controlled environment breaks down, family units fracture and have to find each other again. Survival depends on people who weren't prepared for this suddenly having to be. Jurassic Park proved audiences would sit through genuine terror if the wonder came first and felt earned. Oak Street strips away the theme park. What's left is the fear, unfiltered, dropped straight into someone's backyard. The 2000s pulled the genre back down to ground level. No more spectacle for its own sake. Just a family, a house, and something outside that refuses to be understood or negotiated with. The scale got smaller. The dread got sharper. One film in particular took the cosmic threat and made it almost entirely about what happens inside four walls when the outside world stops making sense.
Stop! There's two of them talking.
Signs strips the genre down to its studs: a farmhouse, a family already fractured by grief, and a threat that never fully reveals itself until it absolutely has to. M. Night Shyamalan's film understood something Oak Street clearly absorbed. The scarier version of this story isn't the one with the biggest set pieces. It's the one where an ordinary family has to keep functioning as a family while something incomprehensible closes in around their own home. That's the exact pressure Oak Street puts on the Platts. The neighborhood is gone, the world doesn't make sense anymore, and the only thing anyone actually has control over is each other. Signs made that dynamic the entire engine of its film, rather than a subplot underneath bigger spectacle, and it's a clear tonal ancestor for the quieter, more claustrophobic stretches of Oak Street. The moments where the dinosaurs aren't on screen, and the fear is just about whether this family can hold together. It's proof the genre doesn't need scale to work. It needs stakes that are actually personal. By the 2010s, the genre started looking backward on purpose. Filmmakers who'd grown up on the earlier decades of this lineage began making movies that were explicitly about that nostalgia. Small towns, kids on bikes, something impossible arriving to upend a quiet community. One of those films came from inside Oak Street's own production family, made by the same producer using the same emotional playbook a decade and a half early.
Guys, watch out! Joe, what the hell? Oh my God! Run!
Super 8 is J.J. Abrams making his most direct love letter to exactly the tradition Oak Street now belongs to. Small-town kids, a mysterious event that upends an entire community overnight, and grief quietly running underneath all of it. Abrams produced both films, and the connective tissue is obvious. A deliberate, loving throwback to Amblin-era storytelling, where the fantastical event is inseparable from the emotional lives of the people it happens to. Where Super 8 keeps its mystery held at a slight distance for most of its runtime, letting anticipation do the work, Oak Street commits early and fully. The cosmic event isn't a mystery to be solved, it's an immediate, physical reality the Platts have to survive inside of. But the DNA is unmistakably shared. Ordinary community, extraordinary intrusion, and a filmmaking sensibility that treats nostalgia not as decoration, but as the emotional foundation the whole story stands on. It's the moment this lineage started looking directly at its own reflection. And Oak Street is, in a real sense, produced by the same hand that built that mirror. Which brings the lineage to now. The genre didn't stay in the suburbs. It went further back, all the way to the source. One recent film took the prehistoric threat out of the theme park entirely and put it in the most stripped-down survival scenario possible. No infrastructure, no control, just people and creatures that were never supposed to share the same timeline. Sci-Fi takes the dinosaur survival premise and removes every safety net. No park, no fences, no illusion of control. Just a stranded survivor and a child he's responsible for, trying to stay alive in a prehistoric landscape that was never built to accommodate them. It's the genre at its most elemental. Creatures as pure, unreasoning threat, and survival as an act of pure will rather than clever engineering. That's the exact register Oak Street lands in once its own cosmic event settles and the dinosaurs start closing in. There's no theme park logic to lean on, no expert who understands the rules, just a family thrown into conditions they have no framework for, having to keep each other alive through instinct and stubbornness alone. Sci-Fi proved that stripped-down version of the premise still works, maybe even hits harder, when there's nothing else to hide behind. It's the most recent stop on this road before Oak Street, the genre circling all the way back to its rawest form, right before pulling an entire suburban street into it too. Every generation gets its own version of the ordinary world breaking open. Explorers, Jurassic Park, Signs, Super 8, and 65 each found a different way into that same fear. The end of Oak Street is the newest branch on a tree that's been growing for over 40 years, and it isn't finished yet.